That's valid integration. I feel like this is the most different because I feel the need to introduce myself. Why are we here on YouTube? I don't know, I don't have a good reason. It felt like it was time, you know? I know most of you probably know me from my TikTok. This is me right here. If you're not here from my TikTok and you do not know me, my name is Moriah. I go by MoriahDoesMagick. You can find me on TikTok and on Instagram. So I specialize in trauma and shadow work, spell crafting. I'm on YouTube because I end up answering these same questions over and over again, not only on TikTok, but also in appointments with new clients. And I feel like if I could just get some basics onto a platform where you guys could see them, watch them, kind of learn from here, I feel like it would save us all some time and energy. And I feel like it would also just be a helpful thing to have out there to kind of like give people as a resource. So here we are. I have a YouTube now. Welcome. Please subscribe. Today we're going to do the basics of shadow work, understanding the basics of shadow work. So I'm going to break the entire lesson down into 3 categories for you guys to understand. So first we're going to work on acknowledgement, then we're going to talk about understanding, and finally we're going to talk about integration and the basics that are kind of held within each stage of shadow work. Also how long those stages can last, because it can be different for everyone. So these are going to be like really loose fitting kind of like time zones, but it can give you a good idea of how these are different for everyone truly. I'm actually moving, so I don't really have a nice setup, but since I'm starting a new channel and like you guys don't really have anything to be used to, you know what I'm saying? It's fine, it's fine. And then when I do get like a nice little like backdrop, whatever, you guys can all be happy. It's like a win-win, you know? So before I get into each of these aspects and categories of shadow work, first I want to understand, what is shadow work, right? What is this word that we hear thrown around all the time? So the first thing that we need to understand is that shadow work is not necessarily a spiritual concept. Shadow work is a psychological concept that the spiritual community took in, adopted, and kind of adapted. My cats do not want to deal with me filming right now at all. Is not a spiritual concept. It's a psychological concept that was adopted by the spiritual community and kind of adapted in order to fit into each person's spiritual path. Now, the concept of shadow work was initially conceived by a man named Carl Jung. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who also studied under Sigmund Freud, and a lot of his work has been well renowned in the psychiatric and many other fields due to the fact that not only did he come up with his own theories such as shadow work, but he also took a lot of Freud's theories and concepts into places that were more acceptable in society. Now, Jung's theory, and a theory that still holds strong with most people who study in shadow today, is that your shadow is something that is created during your childhood. It is something that is created by anything in your childhood that does not yield you love. So anything that you did in childhood or acted upon, said in childhood, your actions, behaviors, etc., that didn't receive a positive response in the form of care, comfort, or love from either an adult, your support system, your community, and or a friend. The shadow is completely unique to each person at all times, because even in situations where 2 children, twins, siblings, close in age, for example, who receive the same response to the same actions and or behaviors are still going to respond as human beings in different ways. They may have the same parents, the same set of communities, the same set of family members, and maybe even the same set of friends. The way in which that child responds to feelings of discomfort, embarrassment, guilt, etc. is going to vary from child to child. It's not going to be the same with each one. And I would like to add here, this is just based on my personal experience in this field, is understanding that while the development of the shadow does begin in childhood, that does not mean that you cannot pick up large pieces of shadow at other places in your life. I have experienced many people who all the way up until young adulthood, and even some people at middle age times in their life, pick up very large pieces of shadow that they carry with them. I think it's worthy to keep in mind that while development does begin with your shadow in childhood stages, it does not necessarily end there. We always come back to the same lessons, yes? So understanding that sometimes issues that seem small in your childhood that started a shadow, things such as like trust issues or abandonment of a parent or addiction issues within the family, those things can come up in much bigger, larger ways in your adult life that will still directly tie into your shadow, and it will almost seem as if what came later was a much larger piece of your shadow than whatever happened in childhood. But it's really about understanding those patterns, and I'll get into it into a later video, okay? Met with a lot of people who were like, well, my trauma wasn't really in my childhood, so if my shadow is built in my childhood, then like I'm free of one, and that's not necessarily true. Often we see these reoccurring themes throughout our lives that start in our childhood that we really didn't pay a lot of attention to, and then they grow into kind of like bigger mountains when we're adults and we're self-aware and things like that, and it's just not something I hear spoken enough about. That's all. I'm gonna say it right here, okay? And I want you to remember it forever. The point of shadow work is integration. It is taking those dark pieces of yourself and accepting them, loving them, not judging them, and forming them into your life in a way that is beneficial to you and your life path. It is not about changing you. It is not about judging yourself. And it is not about getting rid of anything, okay? Please remember that. The way that the psychological community currently sees shadow work and the way that they also don't call it that really at all. They are vastly different, but the way that Carl Jung initially saw shadow work and the way that the spiritual community sees shadow work are almost completely identical. He saw shadow work in the term of layers, that there were layers to shadow work, and the top one including flow and just like personal manifestations, and then moving down all the way into psychic abilities that would allow a person to see all of human experience and things such as the initial concept that Carl Jung had of shadow work is very much what the spiritual community follows today. For the most part, I can't speak for all of the spiritual community. I heard a quote one time that said, true magic is not about controlling others or the situation around you, it's about controlling yourself. And shadow work is simply that. Shadow work is about a true sense of personal alchemy and really understanding yourself to the place that you feel like not only do you control yourself and your reactions, but you also live life in a place of just kind of seeing, observing, being the observer, rather than being a person who's wrapped up in the situation. So today I'm going to walk you through acknowledging, understanding, and integrating your shadow. What each of these things mean, what they can look like, and also how long they can potentially last for each person. Again, I'm going to repeat it. These are going to be really loose terms for how long it can last. It's going to be very, very, very unique to each individual. Let's get one thing out in the open on the table right now. Your shadow is not a bad thing. It's used in context where it doesn't belong, and I feel like it's a term that people just truly don't understand. Your shadow is your balance. You cannot have all this light, love, goodness, all of that shit without an equal amount of darkness. And if you refuse to accept or see your darkness, you're truly only hurting yourself and setting yourself up for failure. I want you to consider that you met yourself right now, face to face, okay, a new version of you, but that version of you had been completely unloved, ignored, unacknowledged, completely just like swept under a carpet its entire life. What would that version of you be like? How would they interact with the human world? They had always been ignored, never been loved, always been judged for everything they did, right? That is your shadow, and that is exactly how it feels. Your shadow is this part of you that has completely been ignored and disregarded for the entirety of your life up until this point. This is the first time that you're even acknowledging that this piece of you, this dark part of you, exists. And the crazy part about this, right, is the thing that this part of you needs in order to heal is the love, the non-judgment that it has not been given up until this point. So those are most of the wraparound basics that you'll need to know in order to understand the shadow work lesson. Great. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? Because I literally will never shut up. All right, so with these stages of shadow work that I'm going to break down for you, we're going to start with the very first one, and that very first one is going to be acknowledgement. Starting to understand that your shadow exists, that it lives inside of you, that it acts out for you, that if you don't pay attention to it now, it will eventually become you. Acknowledging your shadow is simply the understanding that you have one. It's simply not only the understanding that you have one, but also understanding the ways in which that is affecting your life and impacting you on a daily basis. My shadow used to seem like such an elusive, like out there thing, and now me and my shadow are like homies. I fucks with my shadow so hard at this point, like we're friends. Like we're friends. So a really good way to start acknowledging your shadow is by looking at the way that you respond to emotional triggers and understanding two things. One, that your emotional triggers are a shadow within themselves. You being triggered emotionally by an event or a person or a thing is initially within itself a piece of shadow. The second thing that you want to understand is that your response to that emotional trigger is also a piece of your shadow. The way in which you respond, specifically if you're a person like me, when I'm emotional, emotional and I'm emotionally responding to something, I almost always regret the way that I respond. So seeing your shadow is not as difficult as acknowledging your shadow, right? Because seeing your shadow is one thing. Understanding that some people see you as cocky or you have a reputation in this place, that's a much different thing than understanding that you actually have a tendency of being rude to people when you're in public, then actually understanding that your emotional triggers are not another person's responsibility. There's a large difference in understanding the places in which you react poorly and respond poorly, and understanding the trigger that it's directly tied to in your life. You lash out at a person when you say something you didn't mean, when you didn't quite mean to be as like cruel as you were, if you didn't mean to cry, if you ran away. All of those pieces of your response that you wish you did not have, all of those are reflections of your shadow. And those are the moments in which your shadow takes over and it's kind of becoming you in a way. It's acting out for you in ways that you're not necessarily consenting to logically, but in the moment, because you're rapidly fueled by emotion, that fuel, that motivation in the form of stress or embarrassment, of guilt, whatever the emotional charge is fueling you to act in a specific way that you logically would not have consented to if you weren't emotionally charged in the first place. Now, if you're just now starting shadow work and you're looking for the first places to acknowledge the pieces of your shadow, two really good things to look at initially are the things about yourself that you judge and the things about yourself that you dislike. We've already talked about looking at your emotional triggers, but you can also look at your overall fears, the things that you fear in life, the things that you fear in taking the next step, the things that you fear within yourself and within your life and within your goals. Those are all really good places to start looking at how this shadow kind of interacts with you on a daily basis. Within this acknowledgement phase, there's also going to be quite a bit of accountability, because it's for a lot of us going to be the first time that we've ever taken a look at ourselves, our actions, the things we do, and actually accepted that they are a part of us instead of blaming it on something else. This is a stage that can last a while. There are a lot of people who kind of tiptoe in shadow work, start to accept things a little bit at a time, but aren't necessarily ready to dive into the process. So I will say that it really depends. Time span of this stage of shadow work is quite literally endless. You are always going to be consistently acknowledging new parts of your shadow and yourself. It is an endless journey of discovery. To move on to the next step, I would say that it takes most people about anywhere from, I would say 4 months at the earliest, all the way up to 2 years between acknowledgement and actually taking the step into processing and understanding. But before moving into the next stage, I would say as soon as 4 months. It really depends on how self-aware you are as a person before stepping into shadow work. A lot of people have done shadow work without actually calling it that. Like, I was in therapy for many, many years before I stepped into the spiritual field. So I had learned quite a bit of self-reflection and shadow work working in therapy. So like, it really depends on your background, also what types of trauma that you have, because for a lot of us who have repressed memories, things such as that, our acknowledgement is going to be an endless ongoing process, and for a lot of us it's going to take us a lot longer to really process the acknowledgements before we're ready to step into that understanding stage of things. 4 months to 2 years is a pretty good but loose time length on this stage of shadow work. All right, next stage that we're moving into, stage of shadow work that we're going to be moving into, is our stage of understanding. This is our stage of processing. This is that moment where we kind of acknowledge our shadow. We see our shadow for what it is. We're willing to work with it. We're ready to do the work to actually change our reactions, our emotional triggers, how we feel about ourselves, our self-judgments, etc. Right? This is where we're ready to take accountability and really do the work in order to change things. This process, I'm going to go ahead and give you the time limit on this. Processing is a multi-year process. Processing is a multi-year process. Understanding is a multi-year process. This is something that is going to take every single person a very long time. I am, 7 years? It's been a minute into my spiritual practice, and my understanding and processing field, I don't even feel like I've started. This phase is something that I also feel like is a lifelong process. I don't think that these phases necessarily really end so much as they kind of just like shift you into the next one. Understanding and processing is not something that can be rushed. It is not something that is worth rushing. I will say that the more time that you really take understanding these things, processing these things, and taking the time to learn about yourself, study yourself, it will all pay off so deeply in the end. Now, what is this phase? This phase is all about taking the acknowledgements that you hold and really taking the time to love yourself, not judge yourself, accept those moments for what they were, accept who you are as a person. This is the point where you're going to start breaking down the moral compass that has been handed to you, and you start breaking open the moral compass that belongs to you. If you don't know what moral compasses are, I just ran a really awesome video on my TikTok about it. You can go check it out right there. Processing and understanding phase is less about the actual shadows and more so about affecting you as a person as a whole. This is the phase where you hug your shadow, you take her in, and you say, I am so sorry. I have forgotten you and left you and abandoned you for so long. I see you, you are valid, I love you, and we're going to care about you from this point forward. That's what this entire process is all about. It's about finding those pieces of you that you feel like were lost or taken from you and really bringing them back to yourself so you can love them and stop ostracizing them in the way that the world has ostracized them. This stage is the hardest stage, in my personal opinion. Integration, very easy. Because, like, integration is the point where, like, you've already worked with something, you understand it completely, and, like, now it's with you. And, like, acknowledgement, also very easy, because you're just looking at things, so you don't even have to touch them. But this stage is where you actually have to step in, do the work, and, like, really get into the nitty-gritty. This is the stage in shadow work where most people drop out. This is also the stage in shadow work where you see a lot of people putting down their practice in general. I'm not going to fearmonger this step of shadow work, okay? It's not scary, but it is the point in shadow work where you step into the unknown deep end to find out how deep it is, except you created that deep end, and the only thing that can get you out of it is you. And for a lot of people, that can be a scary thing. This phase is also when generally most people start to reach out for a mentor, someone to help them. Most of the clients that I see, this is when they're coming to me. They've seen their shadow, they're starting to work on it, they begin to feel stuck, they begin to feel overwhelmed, like there's a lot of it. This is the place where a lot of people start to pick up a mentor, someone to kind of help them, guide them through the shadow work that they're currently working with or going through. This is also when a lot of people tend to pick up a therapist. Therapists are amazingly healthy while doing shadow work. I pride myself in the fact that 98% of the clients who see me also have a licensed psychotherapist who sees them on a regular basis as well. The exciting part about this phase of shadow work is this is where you really start to find out who you are. This is where your path starts to open up for you. This is where your talents start being found. All of your hidden talents that you've been looking for, promise you they're all in your shadow work. This is when a lot of those start coming up and coming out. This is the point where you really start to get to know yourself in a really intimate way that you didn't even previously realize was conceivable in the human life. It's the hardest phase, and it's my favorite one. I can't there's a reason I specialize in trauma and shadow. Okay, we are gliding into our third and final category of our shadow work recap today. That final category would be integration. Integration is the part of shadow work where you take all of those parts of you that were once judged and unloved and ignored and unconscious, and you've taken them in, right? And you process them, you took the time to understand them, you've grown together as one being, you understand why they exist in your life, what their placements are, and how to use them for the benefit of your own life path, and for the most part, those around you, right? This is the part where you take all of those things and you put them together and you say, it's part of me and I'm proud of it. It's the time where you finally get to come out on the other side and you say, I've done the hard work, I've stepped into myself, and I understand me better as a person because I've accepted this piece of me as part of me. Integration does not always make you a better person. I don't make the rules, okay? But it's worth noting, integration does not always mean you come out on the other side a better person in the context of what society sees as a moral person. Sometimes integration means that you have accepted that you're a worse person than you wanted to pretend that you were. Like, for example, let's say you're a liar, right? And you walk into your shadow work and you acknowledge at the very beginning you're a liar, okay? And then in your processing and understanding time, you take the time to process and understand that based on your own personal moral code, fuck what society says, right? Your personal moral code, think that lying is necessary on occasion. So your integration is not necessarily that you're not going to lie anymore. Your integration could be you're only going to lie under these specific circumstances that you deemed are acceptable in your life and your life path. That's valid integration. If you follow me on TikTok, then you've heard me talk a lot about my shadows and how I've integrated a lot of them. But like, let's bring one up for example, kind of like look at what this integration can look like for judgment, for example, right? I have always been a very judgmental person. I just am, always have been. When I first stepped into shadow work, I was judgmental in the fact that as soon as I saw a person, I would form a minimum of 5 judgments in my head. Boom, boom, boom. All of the things I thought were wrong with that person. So a lot of my processing and understanding was understanding why was I judging those people, what self-hatred was I projecting onto them, what self-judgment was I projecting onto them, things such as that, right? Now, when I got this shadow in order and I brought it back in, right, I can't change the fact that I am a judgmental person. I have no problems with the fact that I'm a judgmental person any longer. Why? At this point, with all of the shadow work that I've done and with my integration, I understand that it's not really about me changing the fact that I am judgmental. It's about changing the judgments and the reasons that they're formed. So now when I see a person, I still form 5 judgments about them, but at this point, the vast majority of the judgments that I form about people when I meet them are positive judgments. I judge people in a positive way. I can see the self-reflection in the fact that I see myself in a better light, in a higher light. Therefore, I now also see other people in the same way. I didn't change the fact that I'm judgmental. I changed the way in which I reflect on other people. Valid integration in a sense that you wouldn't normally think about. Just like your shadow, your integrations are going to be completely unique to you. And something to keep in mind through this entire process is through the process of understanding, processing, and integration, what you're meant to be finding out is not necessarily who you are in the eyes of society, but who you are in the eyes of you, and then reflecting that to society, not as a question, but as a statement. You are meant to reflect yourself out into the exterior world as a statement of who you are meant to be and what your life path is, right? That comes in with integration. Integration is not just about reflecting all of this shadow, right? It's about reflecting it in a way that says, I've learned, I've gained wisdom through this. Okay, now I'm not gonna flex on you guys. Sitting for this camera for this long and filming this video has been extremely awkward for me, and I'm praying to the gods that I eventually get less awkward with this. I'm sure I will as it goes on. Okay, I actually got all of the information I wanted on this video, I think. And I think I'm actually done with it. I hope that it doesn't come across as awkward as it seemed on this end of things. Now, this is going to be the first of a few videos this week that I'm uploading, mostly for my website relaunch. My website has relaunched this week. I know that I have been in the last few months and I have not been available for appointments, but my website has relaunched and also has relaunched with this amazing new YouTube channel for you guys. At least I hope it will get amazing, okay? It'll get better, I promise. So this has been MoriahDoesMagick on a short synopsis on shadow work for you guys. I hope this answered a lot of the questions that I've been getting recently. Let me know in the comments how you guys felt about this, what I can change, what I can do better. I mean, it is my first, so take it easy, but you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at MoriahDoesMagick. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm sure you guys will all see me very, very soon. Love your shadows, take care of them, or don't judge them, or I will personally come for you.